Hello everyone, friends. Today we're going to break down one of the most talked about news stories currently being discussed in the United States. The US has massively revoked about 80,000 visas. Why did this happen? Who was affected by this and what will happen next? Let's calmly go through the details point by point to understand what's behind this decision, and I'll explain what's really going on. And you friends, share your opinion in the comments. So at the beginning of 2025, the US authorities announced the cancellation of tens of thousands of visas. Mostly these are tourist, student, and work visas. This number was about 80,000 and came as a shock in the American public sphere and sparked a wave of discussion around the world, not just in the US. Well, because a lot of people want to go specifically to the US. The Trump administration has canceled 80,000 non-immigrant visas, an American official stated. What is important to understand that this is not deportation. The cancellation of visas is absolutely not deportation. This is not a permanent entry ban. No, it's simply the termination of visas. They're annulment for various reasons. I'll talk about these reasons below. In most cases, people simply received a notification, visa holders, that their visa was no longer valid. Well, these notifications mostly come by email to the address that people provided when obtaining their visa. So what are the reasons for visa annulment? There are several reasons, and all of them are connected to the policies of the new US administration in the field of migration. The first reason is the tightening of migration control. The United States is currently experiencing record levels of illegal migration. According to statistics, about 14 million foreign nationals are in the United States illegally. 14 million. That's the size of an entire country. So something needs to be done about this, and that's why Trump rolled up his sleeves and, through his orders and directives, is trying to change the situation. The authorities are tightening the screening of all categories of foreign nationals, essentially. Visas are being revoked if there are suspicions that a person provided false or inaccurate information about themselves when obtaining the visa, or submitted false or forged documents. If violations of the terms of stay are discovered, for example, someone entered the country and overstayed, like if they were supposed to leave after 6 months but didn't. And if a person did not return on time under a previous visa, the State Department has also identified thousands of applications that were processed through intermediary firms. And these intermediary firms provided fake employment certificates from various countries, fictitious bank statements, or forged travel itineraries. In other words, visas were issued based on completely fake documents submitted for visa applications. Such visas are automatically cancelled, and if the visa is still in the process of being obtained when this is discovered, the entire process is terminated. The United States also often uses visa restrictions as a political tool in its foreign policy. This is especially true for countries that refuse to take back deported individuals, do not want to accept them, countries from which there is a large flow of illegal migration, and states that refuse to share information about their citizens with US authorities. After the increased role of the US Department of Homeland Security, many old visas were automatically subjected to re-examination. If there are suspicions of the visa holder's connections with illegal organizations, the visa is also subject to re-examination and may be cancelled. If a person has any visa violations, even the slightest ones, the visa will be cancelled, or if the person submitted incomplete information. That is, all these visas are immediately cancelled as well. Now, who was affected by this cancellation? So, official data points to 4 main groups of foreign citizens whose visas were cancelled. First, these are holders of B1 and B2 tourist visas. The majority of cancellations affected tourist visas specifically. The reasons? The most common reason for a visa being cancelled is overstaying during a previous visit. Even if it was just by a few days, the visa will be cancelled. Another reason is suspicion of illegal employment. Often, many migrants come on a tourist visa and work illegally in the United States. This leads to immediate visa cancellation. Students have also gotten into trouble for violations. For example, a visa will be cancelled if a foreigner is issued a student visa, but does not start their studies on time. In that case, the visa is immediately cancelled as well. If they start their studies but then stop attending classes, the visa will also be cancelled. And for example, if they attend classes but work part-time without permission, even if they are genuinely studying but work without authorization, their student visa will be cancelled. So, if you came to the US to study, then study, don't work. Some foreigners have also had their work visas cancelled. Here the issue lies with the sponsoring company. If a company comes under investigation for fake job openings and a foreigner received an invitation from that company, then accordingly, that foreigner will most likely have their visa cancelled. In addition, the last category is foreign citizens who have used a tourist visa in order to legally enter the United States. However, their real purpose was not actually tourism, but instead it was to seek asylum. So for example, if someone entered from Afghanistan, received a visa, and entered the United States from Afghanistan and then applied for asylum, the American authorities consider this an abuse of the visa. In other words, they stated one purpose, but their real purpose was something else. Do you understand? That's it. Such a visa will be immediately cancelled, and most likely the person will never be able to get it again in the future. Why does this happen? Why is such a strict policy being enforced right now? There are 3 strategies explaining why this is happening, why so many visas have been cancelled. First, of course, this is due to US domestic policy. Currently, migration, the issue of migration, is the main political issue of recent years. And accordingly, we see how Donald Trump is trying to rein in, so to speak, this migration. And now we see what ICE is doing on the streets of American cities and so on. Basically, any administration wants to show toughness and control over the borders, over migration, and so on. That's understandable. Second, the fight against visa tourism. The US is very concerned, especially the Trump administration, about situations where a visa is essentially used, as I already mentioned, not for tourism, but for illegal work. Yes, people come to obtain certain benefits or to apply for asylum. This is the most important thing. Visas are revoked if such cases are discovered. The US also wants to strengthen security and the screening of foreign nationals entering the United States. Countries are tightening controls, and the US is increasing its own controls due to international conflicts, the rise in the number of fake documents submitted during visa applications, and yes, due to threats such as possible espionage, cyber attacks, and so on. All of this also plays a major role in US immigration policy. This affects, in principle, everyone, not just Ukrainians in the US, but also Russians, Asians, and others. In fact, it concerns all foreign nationals, regardless of what nationality a person belongs to. How can you tell? Usually, information and the decision to revoke a visa are sent to the email address that the applicant or visa holder provided when filling out the visa application documents. That's the soft scenario. But the hard scenario is when a person already having a visa and not knowing anything arrives at an American airport, goes through customs and border control, and presents their passport with the visa to the American border officer. The officer checks the computer and is told, "Sorry, your visa has been revoked. We are not allowing you to enter the United States." And the person didn't know about this. The US border officer is the first to tell them. That's it, and the person is not allowed in. So these are basically the 2 main ways a person finds out that their visa has been revoked. So, friends, what conclusion can we draw from this information? The mass revocation of 80,000 visas for foreigners is part of the US's global policy to strengthen migration control. This is clearly the policy being implemented by Trump. It's an attempt to combat fake documents and forgeries submitted by various intermediaries during the process of obtaining American visas. And it's a response, of course, to the huge influx of illegal migrants who are trying to get in by any means and are willing to go to any lengths to enter the United States. But in principle, if a visa is cancelled, of course it's unpleasant, but it's not a catastrophe. Yes, all of this can be fixed. You can simply submit a properly prepared set of documents. If there were no previous violations, nothing was recorded, and the visa was just cancelled by accident, for example, right? You just need to submit your documents correctly, the whole package, and get the visa reissued. But if there have already been some violations, if a person has come to the authorities' attention as a violator, then most likely that person will not get a visa a second time, not even a tourist visa. That's the situation, friends. Of course, because of these decisions, we see that, yes, diabetics won't be allowed in, nor people with obesity. That means visas will be denied for the slightest violations. In other words, that's it. America, so to speak, is closing itself off from violators. Even the slightest violation means a person will no longer be allowed into the United States. That's the situation. Friends, what do you think about this topic? Is such a strict policy by the Americans and Donald Trump justified, or is it going too far? Please share your opinion in the comments.